Hi there! Welcome to Pallet University and the next episode of our PaleoPokes series, where I take a look at the fossil Pokemon from the perspective of a real paleontologist. If you haven't seen any of the videos in this series, make sure to check that playlist up in the cards, as well as if you're one of roughly the 50% of my viewers who are not subscribed, make sure to click that button down below, as well as leave a comment to help me outsmart the YouTube algorithm. Today we're talking about the Generation 4 fossil Pokemon, Cranidos, Rampardos, Shieldon, and Bastiodon. But before we get into talking about them, I need your guys' feedback on something. So we're getting sort of close to the end of this series. I planned on ending it after I finished the Generation 6 fossils. We've already talked about the Generation 8 fossils. That's sort of how we started this series. So after this, there's only going to be 2 more videos in this series. But I sort of came up with an idea to have some guests on who do science education, science communication, like as a living, and who are also big Pokemon fans on the show. So it would be a massive help to me for that video, which is still sort of up in the air. I'm still working out some of the details, but it's going to be sort of a Q&A type session. So these are people who have degrees in paleontology, or farther along in their career than I am, who do science communication for a living, who are generally much better at explaining things than I am. So if you have any sort of questions about Pokemon biology, geology, anything, even just about fossils in general, let me know those down below in the comments as well, because I'm trying to keep a running list of things to ask them when they come on, so that would be a massive help. Okay, back to the Generation 4 fossils. Specifically, if this is the first video in the series that you've seen, what we do is we sort of break down what animals they might have been based off of, and we speculate as to what their type was when they were alive the first time in prehistoric times. Because if you're asking this question, what am I talking about with changing types, you haven't seen our video about fossilization, where we sort of speculate that when a Pokemon is fossilized, their typing changes. So if you haven't seen that video, I highly recommend you go watch it. That will be up in the cards as well. If you don't, there's a solid chance you're going to be confused in this video. These 4 fossil Pokemon are unique compared to every other generation of fossil Pokemon for a few reasons. The first and biggest is that Cranidos and Rampardos are the only pure rock type fossil Pokemon. All of the others have a dual typing, whether it's Kabutops, Omastar, and Caracosta, which we'll talk about in the next episode. They're rock water, or Aerodactyl and Archaeops, who are rock flying. Cranidos and Rampardos are the only ones that are just rock type. The second, and much more insignificant, is that as a kid, I didn't really know or realize, I guess, what Shieldon and Bastiodon were based off of. We'll get into exactly what they are based off of, but as a kid, even one who loved dinosaurs, I just didn't see it as a kid for some reason. Every other fossil I kind of knew pretty much immediately what it was supposed to be, but with these two I just kind of didn't. Anyway, let's start with Cranidos and Rampardos. These two are based off of a group of dinosaurs called Pachycephalosaurians. Colloquially, they're called the headbutt dinosaurs. You might remember the Stygimoloch if you've seen the most recent Jurassic World movie, as the one that could literally break through walls very unrealistically with using its head, because it's got all this, really thick skull and all these horns around its head. Now, this group of dinosaurs is actually really weird, because for the most part, there are obviously some exceptions, and the Pachycephalosaurians are one of them. Dinosaurs in general tend to have a pretty good number of specimens compared to especially some older stuff. But for Pachycephalosaurians, we have very few, just like number of specimens, and almost all of them are crania, which is the really thick top part that they have of their skull, which makes sense because the fossil of Cranidos is called the skull fossil, and really just shows that dome head shape that Cranidos has. Pachycephalosaurians were also kind of weird in that there's a lot of, well, I guess this isn't really weird for dinosaurs. A lot of groups of dinosaurs have a lot of debate in them, but Pachycephalosaurians especially, because there are some people who think that there's only 1 or 2 different kinds of them, and that all of the different genera, the plural of the word genus, and species are just different life stages of some other ones. So for example, some people think that Stygimoloch, the one from Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, is just like a young Pachycephalosaurus, which was generally much bigger. Or it could just potentially be differences between 2 individuals of the same species. Your skeleton and my skeleton will not look exactly the same. And if you only have a little snippet of that part that is different, you might call you and me different species if you only have the context of such a small part of the body. We have so few specimens of these dinosaurs that it's really hard to say which answer is more correct, but just a quick note about the Pokedex for these two. The Pokedex refers to them both as being carnivorous and that they chase their prey very relentlessly, which we'll get back to, which is absolutely not the case. In real life Pachycephalosaurians, they were definitely, there's a lot of things we don't know about them, but one of the things that we do know is that they were definitely herbivores. Anyway, me nerding out about paleontology aside, these Pokemon are based off of a really cool group of animals. But more importantly to this video, as I mentioned earlier, these are the only pure rock-type fossil Pokemon, which presents kind of a new challenge for me in this series. It brings up kind of an interesting question about their typing. If you remember the video where I actually explained how fossilization may work in Pokemon, there are certain strong types and weak types, and the weak types get replaced with rock when the Pokemon is fossilized. So if a Pokemon has two weak types, do they both get replaced with rock? Or, you know, if a Pokemon is, you know, dual rock type, would that not just be pure rock type? If you recall that video where I talk about fossilization, I speculate that only certain elemental types are replaced with the rock type during fossilization, and that's why we see the dual typings that we do in the fossil Pokemon. But what happens when a Pokemon is a dual typing when it dies, but both of its types are replaced with rock? I would think that it would probably end up as just a pure rock type, but I'm pretty sure it's coded in the games. I've done a little bit of like fan game creation, and I know if you code a Pokemon as being, for example, rock type, it'll just drop the second one because it realizes that it's the same as the first, and it will present as just pure rock type. That actually gives us a lot of flexibility when it comes to trying to figure out what type these two Pokemon might have been the first time. They could have been single typed and that single type just got replaced with rock, or they could have been dual typed where both types got replaced with rock and sort of condensed into a single pure rock type Pokemon. So let's find out, shall we? As per usual, the Pokedex was not a very big help for Cranidos. It mostly just talks about how it was kind of dumb and has a really hard head. We kind of knew that already. But the moves that it learns really point in an interesting direction that I'll talk about more with Rampardos. Surprise, surprise, Rampardos also doesn't really have a very useful set of Pokedex entries. Basically, it just gets dumber when it evolves. Also that it was very relentless in chasing its prey, and also that it's been known to be very aggressive once it's been revived. Both of these Pokemon have mentions of their skull being as hard as iron, but as we know, steel is not a type that gets replaced with rock during fossilization, so they aren't steel type. Both are also depicted in the Pokedex as being very aggressive, so I would think they might be dark types, and they also learn quite a bit of dark type moves. They each learn Assurance, Crunch, and Thief. However, when checking their movesets, I also noticed something really weird. For some reason, these two get access to some really weird TM moves. They get access to Ice Beam, Blizzard, Flamethrower, Fire Blast, Thunderbolt, and Thunder, and also all three of the elemental punches. Oh, also a few dragon moves as well, but that makes more sense because according to Pokemon, anything that's like reptilian can be sort of a dragon, so I don't discredit that immediately. And actually at first it sort of made me think of the dragon type because most dragon type Pokemon can learn all of those moves as well. You know, for example, Dragonite, one of the most well-known dragon Pokemon, gets all of those moves. Most dragon type Pokemon do, like Flygon gets Flamethrower and Fire Blast, as well as Thunder Punch and Fire Punch as well. So a lot of dragons do get most of those moves too. However, like the Steel type, Dragon is not a type that gets replaced with Rock during fossilization. We know this because Tyrunt and Tyrantrum are dragon type Pokemon, and they keep their dragon typing. So Dragon is a strong type. If they were dragon types, that type would have been retained, and they'd be dragon type once they were revived. So they were not dragon types. So, what other type gets a weirdly large amount of coverage for basically no reason? If you've already guessed, congratulations. If not, I'll fill you in. It's the normal type. Most normal types do learn a weirdly large amount of coverage moves via TM. For example, Meowth learns Thunderbolt somehow. Licky Licky, Slaking, and Exploud also get all of those elemental moves, as well as some of the dragon type moves that I mentioned Cranidos and Rampardos have access to. I could go on and on with examples, but chances are pretty good if it's a normal type, it gets probably most, if not all, of those elemental moves via TM. Plus, this is probably a coincidence, but Cranidos and Rampardos are known as the Headbutt Pokemon, and Headbutt is a normal type move. So, in keeping with the trend that we've sort of established throughout talking about all of the other fossil Pokemon, Cranidos was probably just single typed, probably just pure normal, but when it evolves into Rampardos, it probably gains the dark typing to go along with it. Man, that one took a little longer than I wanted it to, so I guess it's kind of a good thing that Shieldon and Bastiodon are pretty easy. Although I couldn't tell as a kid for some reason, these two, now that I'm an adult, are very clearly based off of ceratopsian dinosaurs such as Triceratops. Bastiodon specifically is probably based off of a genus called Chasmosaurus, which also had a very square, kind of tall frill as opposed to Triceratops, which was a lot more rounded. These two obviously retain the steel type, but what was their second type when they were alive? Once again, the Pokedex was less than helpful. Basically just talks about how tough their face skin is. Also some interesting things about parental care, which I might make a video about later, but mostly the face thing. As per usual, their moveset was much more helpful. They learned a variety of ground-type moves, including Fissure, by breeding. However, what really caught my eye were these moves. You know, this whole being consistent with our data interpretation thing is getting a little old. Okay, so they learn all of the same moves that led me to suggest that Cranidos and Rampardos were normal types, but is there anything else that could possibly provide an answer for what other type they could have been? Honestly, no. I tried, I really did, but they learn almost nothing besides those moves that I mentioned. Also, rock and ground type moves, which makes sense because they're a fossil, steel type moves, obviously, and lots of normal type moves, and then all of those elemental moves. And like, Bastiodon in general is a Pokemon that's very well known for having very poor coverage. It's actually pretty common to not even run an attacking move, besides I think Metal Burst on Bastiodon. So maybe its moveset's not a great indicator, but again, we have to be consistent with our data. I would much rather just call these two pure steel types, to be honest, but like basically every video in this part of the series so far, we have to be consistent in how we interpret our data. So, Shieldon was likely pure normal, and then Bastiodon was probably normal steel. This episode was a little bit longer than this series usually is, which is really cool because we got to nerd out a little bit about these animals that the Pokemon are based off of, which is really cool. Make sure to let me know your thoughts on this down in the comment section below. I have a feeling that this one's going to be particularly controversial compared to some of the previous ones. Also, make sure to let me know any questions that you would like for this question and answer section for the end of the series. I don't want to spoil who will be coming on, but especially since, you know, they haven't officially confirmed it yet, but I just want to get a head start on some questions that you might be interested in asking them, so make sure to drop those down in the comment section below as well. Make sure to follow me on Twitter at Pallet_U to keep up on all things Pokemon science. And as always, there's a time and place for everything.